Africa, it has been through a lot. Africans, we have been through so many things. Africa never found the true freedom that our forefathers had fought for. And it is now more than ever we need to take what belongs to us. In order for us to do so, we need to sit down and talk.
The one thing we will never allow anyone in the world to interfere with is our sovereignty.
In this day and era, you still have a situation where there are African states paying colonial tax to France. France, it is what it is because of those African states. You have the reserve banks of African states in France and not in Africa itself. And we must accept that and say it is acceptable, it is in the interest of Africa. It is not. We want Africans to have control over their own currency. We want Africans to have control over their own economy and what constitutes their own economy.
African countries, they are now tired of France. African countries, they don't want to see France anymore. African countries, they are saying no to France with its leadership. That is the reason why they are asking them to be removed from their country. They don't want anything to do with France.
We've decided on the coordinated and organised withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. Thus, the camp of the 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion in Port-Bouet will be handed over to the armed forces of Ivory Coast starting in January 2025.
At the same time, Senegal's president has officially set an expiry date for the presence of French soldiers in his country.
I have instructed the Minister for the Armed Forces to propose a new doctrine for cooperation in defense and security, involving the end of all the foreign military presences in Senegal from 2025.
The French President Emmanuel Macron have just insulted African nations when he said this.
We had a secure relationship. In truth, it was in two parts. One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay, it'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who've not had the courage in the face of public opinion to bear it, that none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
Now imagine this are the words which are coming from the mouth of a leader toward people of Africa after everything France have put Africa through. Imagine that. Emmanuel Macron have to come and disrespect Africans in such manners. Perhaps he thought him saying these words to African nations, it won't affect Africans. Perhaps he thought Africans, they won't come on him. Unfortunately for him, because right now as we are talking, Africans all over around the world, whether it is in Africa continent, whether it is in diaspora, all of them, they are coming forward to criticize this kind of language coming from the French President Emmanuel Macron.
And I want to appeal to all of you here that we should not accept the intimidation which is coming from the Western world to us as a country.
To manage our minerals correctly, so that they are not plundered by those from outside our region and continent.
Africa is a hub for natural resources. It has always been for the West. And now Africa has multiple options.
They should not allow another person to give them a prescription of how Africa should look like or what we need in our Africa, because we know what we need in our Africa.
€30 million yes, that is going to release to the French diplomatic missions to kick off the implementation of this policy. But what is 40 million when you hear
that you're going to be blocked from going to America? Do I need to go to America?
It's a legitimate question because indeed there are many things that are going wrong which are not being attended to.
The United States must understand that Africans are not going to take it anymore.
and we're here to talk about it. But before we get to talk even more about this, well, I want us first to get to understand why Emmanuel Macron have to come and address African leaders in such manners. Why Emmanuel Macron have to come and have this kind of strong language toward people of Africa. Well, it all started with the Republic of Chad when they say,
more than 60 years after Chad gained independence from France, French troops are finally packing up to leave for good, as a growing number of African nations force their former coloniser to withdraw its military. Last month, Ivory Coast joined Chad and Senegal in cutting military ties following announcements from Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. The move, dubbed Frexit, comes amid growing local resentment towards France. French troops stayed on in West Africa after it ended its colonial rule in the 60s. And French soldiers have been fighting alongside local forces for decades. But critics say they've had little effect in deterring security threats and militant groups in recent years. Military coups in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger have also sped up the withdrawal of French forces. Troop numbers are estimated to have dropped by around 70% since 2021. France still maintains a large military base in Djibouti, East Africa, where President Emmanuel Macron visited last month. But its exit elsewhere has seen countries look for other international support, with Russian mercenaries now operating in the region. French forces are likely to be almost entirely out of West Africa by the end of the year, signalling a significant shift in its influence over its former colonies.
Now you understand why Emmanuel Macron is so angry against people of Africa. Now do you understand the reason why Emmanuel Macron have to disrespect African nations? Of course, the man is a wounded animal whom he had feel like he lost it everything. Imagine less than 5 years only, more than 14 countries around Africa, which France they were in process of with their military base. Well, they are all being kicked out of those African countries. This it is something which Emmanuel Macron can't be able to justify to the French people. So therefore, he just trying to kind of like have to find something that he can say against Africans so that people of France, they can maybe believe in him. But forgetting that the history is there to tell whether Emmanuel Macron is right on this one or not. Emmanuel Macron said that the African nations, they are so ungrateful. In his word, I quote, he had to explain saying that Africa should be saying thanks to France. Now, this left us only to one question to know what kind of thanks does Emmanuel Macron want Africans to say to France? Because he seemed to not even read the history. Africans, they should come and thank France for what reason? Can Emmanuel Macron come and tell us exactly what France have done in Africa? Because according to his speech, he came and said that, if these countries, they have become sovereign country, it is all thanks to France.
I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay, it'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who've not had the courage in the face of public opinion to bear it, that none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
Sovereign in which way? Day and night, whenever we talk here, we've been telling you guys on how Africa still being colonized by the Western. Because these people, they pretended to leave Africa physically, but not economically, not mentally and morally. These people, they continue to colonize Africa in different ways. They hold Africa in many different ways. They do not want Africa to develop because of the reasons which they believe that is going to destroy their economy. They sacrifice the development of Africa because they want to develop their own countries. I have this video that I came across with, and I would like you guys to watch it so that you can get to understand on how this French professor get to reveal the secret on how the Western does not want to see Africa to get to develop. They are afraid of Africa to be developed. Have watched this professor what he's saying, then you will tell me whether this man is right or not, because he just make a serious revelations of something which we've been talking here each and every time. Have watch.
Personne n'a intérêt à ce que l'Afrique se développe trop.
But no one is interested in Africa developing too much. Because if it develops tomorrow, let's imagine Africa develops its industry like South Korea did, a country that was as poor as Mozambique 60 years ago. If tomorrow it starts making cars, if tomorrow it starts refining its oil, if tomorrow it starts doing agriculture and transforming its agricultural products, it will no longer buy our imports. And so we are not interested in that situation. We are not interested. So the will of the rich countries. We're talking about geopolitics today. Everywhere we see, there is clearly no interest in these countries developing. These less developed countries.
Il y avait cette idée, en fait, dans la tête des gens que...
There was this idea, actually in people's minds, that you develop a country with entrepreneurs. It's an important part, but it's not the main part. An industry is needed, a heavy industry. These countries export oil, export cocoa, export raw materials, but these raw materials they export are often processed in other countries. And processing is what creates jobs.
Quand vous avez une compagnie étrangère qui s'installe, je prends toujours l'exemple moi, du Congo Brazzaville que je connais bien.
When you have a foreign company setting up, I always take the example of Congo-Brazzaville, which I know well. Congo-Brazzaville, over 90%, only exports oil. This oil is produced by whom? Exploited by whom? By mostly private companies. 60% total, 30% ENI. The Italian, 90% of the company. Then you have a few companies here and there, private ones.
Elle récupère une partie de l'argent, mais elle est incapable de l'exploiter.
The public Congolese oil company is unable to do drilling. It is unable to exploit all of its oil. It collects part of the money, but it is unable to exploit it. So all the knowledge on production, on reserves, all the quantities, production volumes are decided by the private company, which does not depend on the country. So that's the first thing. There is a real asymmetry of information between the state and the company. The prices of their goods, 90% of exports, therefore oil, the price is not determined by Congo. It is determined by the financial markets. So, when there are tense geopolitical situations like now, prices go up, it benefits them. When the price is zero, as in the COVID period, nothing comes in. Nothing comes in. So we can see that there is a very strong dependence. And then this product is exported, processed in France or elsewhere. And the Congolese state buys gasoline back from these countries. So the reality is that there should be an industry that could transform this production on the spot. And it is this one that would create jobs, refineries, distribution, etc. But to have that, what is needed? Funding is needed to finance heavy industry. It's not with €1 of microcredit that you're going to finance heavy industry. And this funding, if the banks don't want to lend it, who will lend it? It's China, but China is a country. It will lend it under certain conditions. Conditions sometimes on access to raw materials or more advantageous sharing of production for them. And so it does not allow them to be completely independent. And it must be kept in mind that rich countries have developed in a world where they created conditions that were favorable to them. The WTO, the World Trade Organization, is an organization that has favored rich countries much more than poor countries.
Again, you can see that with this kind of revelations which is coming from their own people, there is nothing good that Macron can have the courage to come and tell Africans that no, you guys should be saying thanks to France. Because these are the things which these people have been doing each and every time in Africa. In order for them to hold the economy of Africa, in order for them to destroy the development of Africans. Because what this professor just explained, it really makes sense. These are the things showing that if Africa can be able to invent their own aeroplanes or their own vehicles, their own phones, their own stuff, which means it will destroy their economy, because Africans won't be coming to buy again this material from them. Let me give you also one example. Check, for example, iPhone. This iPhone in their countries, the price is nothing, very, very cheap. But when it comes to in Africa, the price of this product are being increased, even though they know very well that these minerals that they had to invade these iPhones with, it came from Africa continent. But yet they are acting like no, they are not taking this mineral from Africa continent. Instead, they want to behave in somehow. So they do these things the way they wish, because they do not want to see Africa develop, because they know once Africa get to develop, their market will be over. Now, what is Macron coming to tell us here, when the reality that we've been seeing is different from other things? Emmanuel Macron is saying that no, these countries, they should come and say thanks to France. But we have not seen any things that France have done in Africa. Can you give me one country or one mission which France have done in Africa which was successful? Nothing. Instead, what they did, it was for them to come in Libya and put serious conflict among Libyans. And this ended up creating these terrorist attacks all over Africa continent, especially in Sahel region. And since then, things never been the same. As I always tell you guys, the problem of these people is that they think we are stupid. Because they'll come and create a problem, at the same time they'll come and jump in the front line as the peacekeeping, as the middlemen who want to bring peace. And this peace, it will never gonna come with a good ideas. It will come with a certain kind of agreement or contracts, which you guys will have to accept, because they will be there to make sure that they benefit from these agreements, which the government and the politicians will have to sign. So they went in Libya. They create a serious trouble over there. Once these terrorists start splitting all over, like Boko Haram and different, name them, all these terrorists, as they were going all over in Chad, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, they are the first one to come in and start pretending like, no, we are here to help you, we are here to make sure that we stop the war, but which they never succeed. So guys, the problem here, for Emmanuel Macron to get to this point of insulting or disrespecting Africans, it is all because African countries, they are now tired of France. African countries, they don't want to see France anymore. African countries, they are saying no to France with its leadership. That is the reason why they are asking them to to be removed from their country. They don't want anything to do with France. And that is what is driving France insane. Because France knows very well that them losing control of these countries is losing total control of African continent. Remember, in the time of colonizations, France, they were colonizing about 33 to 34 countries. Out of all these countries we have in Africa continent, they were the one who were having a last word to say from all these countries, from Djibouti to Niger or Madagascar. These people, they were the one who were ruling over there. Today, these countries, they have chosen the true independence, which they don't want anything to do with France. They want to do things on their own. So Emmanuel Macron could not take this more lightly. Emmanuel Macron could not accept this kind of defeat. So he has to come and see on how he can say something which can piss off Africans. While he said it, that it was according to him, maybe, as I said, he did forget the history of France and Africa. Until when the Prime Minister of Senegal, Minister Sonko, who had to come and tell him, reminding him or refresh his mind that France military in Africa, they have not done nothing. You can say whatever you are saying, but military in Africa, when it comes to France militaries, they have not done nothing. They have not fight anyway, and then we see the result out. They have not done nothing which African people, they can come today and say thanks to France because of whatsoever you feel like, no, it is good for you. So you can say whatever you want to say, maybe just to impress people of France, but not for people of Africa. Instead, African militaries, they have done something for France, and he took him far by reminding him of what African militaries did during the World War II. We all know that France was being occupied by Germans. The Germans, they were there with Hitler. France could not have the power to fight them. But there were a lot of African soldiers who went over there, and they were all killed, most of them, in order for France to have this freedom that they're having, in order for France to gain back its land. Well, there were a sacrifice of African soldiers. At least the history is there to remind Emmanuel Macron in case if he had forgotten about all these things. So that was the answer from the Prime Minister of Senegal. Chad, they came harsh also on him to remind him that Emmanuel Macron should learn on how to respect Africans, because African nations, they are sovereign countries, and should learn on how to respect them. If they don't want to be with you, if African nations they don't want to work with you, France have to accept that, and not to start talking things which you don't even memorize. Or they should come and say thanks, or maybe they'll do it later on. Who's gonna do it? Because with this kind of language, actually, even the three countries which remains with France militaries, Djibouti and these other nations, of course they are going also to ask France from their to be out from their country, because they can tell already that Emmanuel Macron with France, they don't have respect for people of Africa. And these nations, they are doing all this, all thanks to people such as Julius Malema and Ibrahim Traore. Why did I mention Julius Malema in all this? Because sometimes we seem to forget things very quick. Well, I mentioned Julius Malema in all this because in 2022, Julius Malema marched with the EFF members to the embassy of France. Julius Malema had asked France out of Africa.
The economic freedom fighters, therefore, stands here in front of the embassy of the slave traders, the colonialists, the warmongers, and the imperialists to make the following demands. France must grant full independence to all African countries and allow them to determine their own currencies, monetary policies, and economic direction. France must stop all colonial taxes because it is the wealth of the African continent, the blood and sweat of Africans that build all infrastructure which African countries are forced to pay for many decades after the so-called independence.
Yep, Julius Malema did insist on that part. He even sent a loud message to all African leaders that they should isolate themselves from France, that they should chase France and the Western outside of Africa continent, because these people, they never work for the good of Africans. They are there to destroy the economy of Africans. They are there to continue colonizing Africans in a different way, or whether it is economically or any other way is possible.
You know, they are blaming France for all the problems in Africa. We are responsible for everything. I mean, France or the West or someone else. There is always someone to blame, you know, for all the challenges of Africa.
That was actually the message which Julius Malema have given to all African leaders. And seeing people such as Ibrahim Traore jumping in the front line and start chasing these people from their country, followed by Mali and Niger. Today we're talking about Ivory Coast, we're talking about Chad, we're talking about other many nations. Well, that is something which needs to be saluted. That is something which needs for us to be proud of, which means Africans, they can get to listen the message of our true liberators. Africans, they can get to have an idea on how to deal with this kind of people. Because the message The gospel which started with people like Prof. Lumumba or Julius Malema from South Africa, this message seems like it's reaching even to more many people out there. And what end up giving them even more courage is to see on how Ibrahim Traoré have managed to handle all these people. Well, at first it was all about them threatening him, saying that we're gonna take you out, blah blah. They tried to organize a military coup against him, they failed. They tried to assassinate him, they failed. They tried to put poison in his food, they failed. To the point that the man today can't even trust his own wife to greet her. Now he have to be wearing gloves all over his hands because he can't be shaking people's hands because you don't know who's having the poisons in their hands. Now, after the Western, they have put all this effort to eliminate or sanctions Ibrahim Traoré with the Burkina Faso, they keep on failing. This was a very loud message to each and every African leaders to start seeing that no, actually we can also do it. If Ibrahim Traoré did this, actually we can also do this, the same thing. And that's what is happening. So Ibrahim Traoré, he have woken up the eyes or opened up the eyes of many African leaders. Yesterday, you guys saw how he embarrassed them in Ghana. From the moment when they mentioned his name, and see on how Ibrahim Traoré was celebrated like a true hero. This was a very strong message which Africans, they were sending to all African leaders who were seated over there, that we know who you are and we know to whom you guys you service. Because the true person that we get a true service, or the person who represents people of Africa, there he is, and we are so happy to have him around. That kind of message is what is also revolting many African leaders out there. They'll get to understand that no, actually we need to behave in the good way, because see on how Ibrahim Traoré is being celebrated out there in Africa. How many times of us, if we have to follow the same lead as well? And I think that is something which end up motivating them in the way of them trying to start like doing things more differently. So it is the message which Africans have to send back to Emmanuel Macron by reminding him that Africa have done a lot for France. If France it is what it is today, it is all thanks to Africa continent. They get to help them to fight against the Germans. They let them steal their mineral resource for many years. Their former president Jacques Chirac once said these things, that we can't bite the hands that feed us, because if France it is what it is today, it is all thanks to Africa. So instead of Emmanuel Macron and France to come and say thanks to African nations, they are busy wanting or asking for Africans to go and say thanks to them. For what reasons? Which even fail to elaborate more. See the kind of hypocrites that this Western can have sometimes. But forgetting that what they have done, it is something that it had make each and every African leader to not even want to hear from them. And when all these things that it is happening, Africans, they are having another option, which is China and Russia. And that's what is driving them insane. So guys, follow us in our next video so that you get to understand the choice which Africans they have made so far when it comes to trade with other nations between the Western and the Middle East country. So we are looking forward to see you again. But please drop us your comment in the comment section. Tell us what you think about this move that Africans take against Emmanuel Macron in France after he had come in the press conference and tried to disrespect African nations. So we're looking forward to get to hear what you have to say about this. Above all, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed, and make sure that you give us your thumbs up so that whenever we're here live, you'll be able to join us. I believe that will be all for now. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate your time here. We are looking forward to see you again in our next video. For now, continue to be yourself, be good, be kind, have respect for everyone in order for you to be respected. May God bless you all. I'll see you again very soon in our next video. Ciao, ciao.
Yelele, yelele, yelele.